We're going to move on now to the next item of business, which is a statement by Jean Freeman on winter preparedness of the NHS. The Cabinet Secretary will also take questions at the end of her statement. I would encourage all members who wish to contribute to this statement, or to ask questions, I should say, to press their request buttons. And I call on the Cabinet Secretary, Jean Freeman.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, the rise in positive cases for COVID-19 confirm that not only is the pandemic still with us, but this virus will seize any opportunity to spread. Today, I will set out the steps we are taking to prepare our NHS to respond to this and to wider winter pressures. Earlier this year, I put our NHS on an emergency footing, and that emergency remains. The plan published today is directly linked to the social care plan I will publish next week. They are interconnected and interdependent, and I will return to Parliament next week to set that plan out in more detail. Scientific evidence indicates that prior to a vaccine, further waves of infection are probable. Previously, the incredible commitment of our health and social care staff, as well as the unstinting support and perseverance of people in Scotland, prevented the NHS from being overwhelmed. Our overriding priority at this time is to make sure that that continues to be the case. That is not only vital to saving lives and providing care to those with COVID-19, it is vital if we are to make sure, as far as we can, that care can be provided safely for the other health needs of our nation. We need to make every effort to prepare the NHS for the pressures it will face in the coming months, as we do every winter. But we do that this year with the additional demands from a significant resurgence of COVID-19 and from the uncertainty of Brexit, as the threat of no deal at the end of the transition period remains. A few weeks ago, I set out the key pressures on our NHS. The critical public health measures to deal with COVID-19 of test and protect and flu vaccination, the demands of dealing with rising COVID cases and holding capacity for any surge in these numbers, the need to restart and maintain critical healthcare services in the community and in hospital to deal with those who've been waiting as a result of the earlier lockdown, and do what we can to prevent that number significantly increasing. And to do that whilst putting in place necessary COVID-safe measures of increased PPE, physical distancing and enhanced cleaning, all of which inevitably decrease the volume of patients that can be seen in any one clinical or theatre session. All of those demands are here now and facing a workforce who have had a very tough year already. So it is inevitable that difficult decisions will have to be taken to prioritise NHS capacity and resilience to address these. That's why today I'm publishing our winter preparedness plan for the NHS to set out those very real challenges and capture the range of actions we're taking and the resources being made available to support what has to be a multifaceted response. Last month, I announced £1.1 billion for NHS health boards and integration authorities to meet the costs of responding to the pandemic. Today, I'm announcing an additional £37 million to ensure our health and care services are in the best position to respond to these unprecedented winter challenges. These resources will support our key priorities for the next phase: our vaccination programmes, test and protect, and sustaining essential services. Our objectives on vaccinations are twofold: to vaccinate nearly 2.5 million people, an increase of 50% over last year for the flu, and to be ready to deliver a safe, effective vaccine against COVID-19 as soon as one is available. The first of these is underway, using a range of delivery routes, with health boards aiming to deliver vaccinations to all high-risk groups by the 31st of December, with many operating 7 days a week to do that. Alongside this, our work is underway, learning the lessons from the flu programme to see a national plan with local delivery for the COVID-19 vaccine. As soon as we have that vaccine validated and available, our initial focus will be on protecting the most vulnerable from harm. As that work crystallises, I intend to return to the Chamber to provide more detail to members. Our Test and Protect strategy is a vital element in that battle to disrupt the spread of the virus. We are increasing overall Scottish testing capacity from the current position of around 27,000 to at least 65,000 tests per day by winter, drawing upon both NHS Scotland and UK-wide Lighthouse Lab capacities. 3 new regional NHS testing hubs will be fully operational by early December, contributing an additional 22,000 daily tests to that 65,000 number. And we're working through what additional capacity new processing technologies can offer and new test routes can bring to our plan to increase the cohorts of individuals offered regular asymptomatic testing, in line with the clinical review published last Friday. Our contact tracing record remains strong. Over the 4-week period of the 21st of September to the 18th of October, weeks when case numbers were rising, 91% of positive cases were successfully completed within 48 hours, 75% of that number within 24 hours. This is a vital service, our second line of defence, and so we continue to actively ensure health boards use the resources provided to make sure we have both the capacity and the backup resilience through the National Contact Tracing Centre. Members will recall the planning we put in place to deal with hospital and ICU COVID cases in the early months. That need to repurpose approximately 3,000 acute beds nationwide for COVID-19 patients remains. Our health boards retain the ability to double ICU capacity within 1 week, treble it in 2 weeks, and quadruple it to over 700 should circumstances demand. And today, in some of our acute settings, we can see right now the importance of retaining that capacity as hospital and ICU cases rise. But these beds need staff, trained, skilled staff. So an increase in COVID cases inevitably limits capacity for other services. We need to be ready for this and plan for the possibility that resumed non-COVID services may have to be limited or paused so we can direct capacity to accommodate COVID or winter pressures. Those pressures will impact differently across the country, and we can see that today. But whilst that is the case, we need to have an approach that strives for as much equity of access for patients as we can, and unlike in the early response, strives to maintain as much non-COVID healthcare as possible. So we're putting in place a national framework to ensure that a consistent approach to prioritisation for planned and unplanned care exists across the country, alongside actions to mitigate the impact in local areas if we face a situation where services need to be suspended for any length of time. The pressure on acute capacity and the patient-centred approach of our NHS, which works to make sure people receive the right care in the right place, makes the work underway to redesign urgent care all the more important. That redesign work, undertaken with the full involvement of clinical colleagues, boards, and overseen by the Mobilisation Recovery Group, which I chair, aims to help patients know where to go for urgent care when they need it. This is a significant programme of work, and it won't be completed in 6 months or even a year. It will be undertaken carefully and in stages. And to test out the first part, make sure it works and is safe and accessible, the first phase of that redesign programme will be implemented as a Pathfinder site over November. With the lessons and the learning from that, from patients as well as from the service, we then aim for a national rollout in December, supported by £20 million of investment and a major information campaign to ensure people know how to access the right care in the right place. Whilst our response to COVID-19 is fundamentally important, so too is our ability to continue to provide care and treatment for other health needs, both urgent and routine. As we have throughout the pandemic, we will continue to provide treatment for cancer and other life-threatening conditions. More recently, health boards have begun to safely restart a number of diagnostic and screening services and elective procedures. We wrote to health boards and their integration authority partners last month to confirm the provision of over £78 million to ensure that NHS boards continue to restore as much of their elective activity as circumstances allow. This funding will support additional activity with over 70,000 outpatient appointments, over 13,800 elective procedures and over 98,000 diagnostic tests. NHS Golden Jubilee continues to play an important role, with an additional 1,600 urgent and cancer patients seen between March and September, and a plan to treat a further 13,000 across all relevant surgical specialties before the end of March next year, operating as a COVID-light site. Over 4,000 outpatients have been seen in NHS Louisa Jordan since July, with numbers continuing to grow. The facility offers us crucial additional capacity in orthopaedics, dermatology, oral medicine and imaging, as well as remaining ready to stand up to care for COVID patients if we need it to. The curtailment of many services for patients in the early stage of the pandemic meant that many people who need care are waiting longer than any of us would want. I'm truly grateful to them for bearing with us as far as they have done. And I want to assure them that we are doing all we can to get the care to them as quickly as possible. The place to start is with clinical judgment, so that we prioritise planned, unplanned care based on clinical need, so that those with the greatest need are treated first, and that we do that in a consistent way across the country. Presiding Officer, I said at the outset that addressing all these demands raises perhaps the most significant demand of all, the demand on NHS staff who have already had such a tough year. We've asked so much of them, and we're asking it again. There aren't words to express how truly grateful I am to them, but more than words, we need to make sure they have the support they need. I intend that all of the practical, on-the-ground support we saw in the early phase remains, and the significant additional support for mental health and well-being stays in place, ensuring staff hubs and rest areas are maintained and establishing a mental health network backed initially by £5 million of funding. Presiding Officer, we know that the next few months, like the year so far, are not going to be easy. They will once again require difficult judgments and difficult choices to be made. I'm all too aware of the sacrifices our response will entail, from the amazing but weary frontline workers to those across our communities who may need to wait longer for treatment than I would want. But I am absolutely determined that we will do everything in our power to be ready for these challenges. We have learnt a great deal from the first wave of the pandemic, and we are better prepared. Our NHS Winter Preparedness Plan, published today, sets out the range of actions we are taking to support our incredible healthcare services and to work with them to manage this next phase. That is nothing more than they and the people of Scotland deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. And we'll move to questions. Our first from Donald Cameron, who joins us remotely. Donald Cameron.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement and the publication of the plan. As we move into winter, it's more critical than ever that we ensure the most vulnerable in our society receive their flu vaccinations. However, as we've seen over the last few weeks, the rollout of this vaccination programme has been both chaotic and confusing, with issues in NHS Ayrshire and Arran due to unprecedented demand, problems with booking appointments in NHS Tayside and NHS Fife, and NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde having to apologise for notifying people about their appointments after they'd taken place. Ministers need to get a grip on this because people will rightly worry that if the Scottish Government is struggling to organise a vaccination programme for flu, how will it be able to organise an effective COVID vaccination programme when that time comes? In that regard, can the Cabinet Secretary explain why the COVID vaccination programme appears to be using the same model as the flu vaccine, namely a national plan with health board delivery? And secondly, in relation to her comment that there is a possibility that non-COVID services may have to be limited or paused this winter, will she set out in exactly what circumstances that will happen, given the existing NHS backlog and the fact that we all know the incredible damage that can result from cancelling planned operations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks very much. I'm grateful to Mr Cameron for his questions. I don't believe that the flu vaccination programme has been shambolic across the country. Now, let me be clear. There have undoubtedly been problems in a number of areas, some of which boards have acted quickly to resolve, some of which they are still trying to resolve, and I'm acutely aware of that. But in other parts of the country, the vaccination programme has worked relatively smoothly, and I've had almost an equal number of complaints from individuals as I have from individuals telling me that it worked well for them. But there are undoubtedly lessons to be learned, and Mr Cameron is wrong that the COVID vaccination delivery programme will not follow the same model as the flu programme, because those lessons need to be learned. So there are a number of ways in which it will be different. This will be a truly national plan with the delivery models that boards will then use determined in consultation with boards, but determined nationally, so that all boards are making maximum use of all the routes that are available, not only hubs and walk-in and drive-through centres, but community pharmacy, GP practices, local mobile delivery units for the vaccination, particularly for remote and island communities. And as I said earlier, as soon as that final plan is crystallised and we have all the details in place, including the milestones and the delivery timetables, then I will come back to Parliament to make sure that members are informed of that and can ask me questions about that. In terms of his second question about where we might have to pause or slow down the delivery of non-COVID healthcare services, I need to say two things. The delivery of non-COVID healthcare services is slowed down already, because the use of PPE, making sites COVID safe, physical distancing, inevitably slows down the volume. That's where Louisa Jordan and Golden Jubilee is a significant help to us in trying to help us address some of those mitigating measures. But in addition, our boards are now operating a mutual aid arrangement where they help each other where there are nearby boards. There is some of that happening at the moment between Forth Valley and NHS Lanarkshire, which, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, is under particular pressure in terms of COVID cases. So that mutual aid arrangement will be formally in place across all our boards where it is practical and feasible to do it. And in terms of the other areas where we have to significantly pause for any length of time, that will not be a decision taken lightly. It will be taken with the medical director and others in those boards. But where we can, we will prioritise on the basis of clinical need, so that the most urgent patients for non-COVID healthcare, not urgent care, but non-COVID healthcare, will be seen first, and we'll work our way through that, looking to deploy as many additional resources as we can to ensure that people do not wait longer than they have to.
Thank you. Monica Lennon, to be followed by Annabel Ewing. Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of her statement and place on record Scottish Labour's gratitude to all healthcare workers. They're working incredibly hard to keep our NHS going. The additional financial support is welcome. However, there are already serious signs that our NHS is struggling to cope with COVID-19, never mind winter pressures and normal business. In the summer, health boards and the Cabinet Secretary knows as they raised fears about resilience and their ability to deliver the expanded flu vaccination programme. And it is fair to say it's not going smoothly in every part of Scotland, and there are real concerns. And I think Donald Cameron, I heard him mention Ayrshire and Arran, where staff were told that their flu jabs have been suspended, and other boards have apologised for putting our oldest citizens to the back of the queue. So, as well as confirming when the flu vaccination programme will get back on track in all parts of Scotland, can the Cabinet Secretary also confirm right now how many wards are currently closed due to COVID-19 outbreaks? And can she give some further assurance that our hospitals are properly equipped in terms of PPE, access to testing? Because not only have wards closed, we are aware of some tragic cases where patients have died in hospital after getting COVID. I don't know if you can give a further update on that, but also people are worried about going into hospital, and that is no good at all, Cabinet Secretary. So I would appreciate some further reassurance on that. Cabinet Secretary.
Thanks very much. I mean, I really do need to be clear that I am not saying that the flu vaccination programme across Scotland has gone smoothly. There are some boards where it has gone very well, but there are other boards where it has not, either because they have been overwhelmed by telephone inquiries and weren't staffed up to deal with that, or where they have used the SIRS programme, which is used for childhood vaccination, to plan appointments. And the SIRS programme, as we all know, and I know Ms Lennon knows because she's nodding away there, is about childhood vaccination, and rightly, for that group, puts the youngest first. Not appropriate for flu. where we need to prioritise those who are oldest and most at risk first. And so we will most certainly not be using the SUS programme for the COVID vaccination programme. And in those places, boards, so the board that is most high profile in this regard is Greater Glasgow and Clyde. They have absolutely rightly apologised. In my own mind, I think they've taken a wee bit too long to do it, but they've done it. They've apologised and they've offered a reassurance. And the reassurance is that everyone over the age of 65 who has not received an appointment letter so far will receive one this week, that they will run parallel programmes, that they will make every effort to give people as much local accessibility as they possibly can, and they will staff up to do that. And Ms Lennon has my personal assurance that where individual boards, including Greater Glasgow and Clyde, have encountered issues, that I look at that every single day to see whether or not that they are making the improvements that I need them to make. In Fife, for example, they have made those improvements. In Grampian, I'm assured today that there is no call waiting on their phone lines because they've staffed up to do that. So we learn as we go. No great comfort to patients who are anxious and so on, but we learn as we go, and we apply that to the COVID vaccination programme, and members will be able to scrutinise that and check that we have actually learned and applied all those lessons. In terms of the other questions about the wards closed, I don't have the accurate number, and I wouldn't want to estimate that, so I'm very happy to make sure that Ms Lennon has that number later today, if it's possible for my officials to do that, or first thing tomorrow. In terms of resilience and so on, we published a PPE plan today. That gives members, I hope, assurance about the forward planning in PPE. And as Ms Lennon knows, thanks to the efforts of my colleague, Mr McKee, if you take out rubber gloves, 90% of our demand, our need for PPE is now sourced in Scotland through Scottish companies. And that includes demand not just from the health service, but the demand we met in the first phase across social care, primary care, pharmacy and so on, and dentistry, of course. So we watch PPE constantly, but I am confident that we have the right infrastructure in place and the right forward ordering and the resilience of our own domestic supply of PPE that we will be able to meet what is needed. The modelling has been done based on the demands in the early phases. On hospital-acquired infections, Ms Lennon is right to point to that. The most recent statistics published indicate that there is an increase in the number of probable, as you know that's how they describe it, but probable COVID cases acquired in hospital. And the nosocomial group, which, as you know, identified those NHS staff that should be subject to regular testing, and that is underway, is looking actively at how we extend NHS staff testing in acute and in primary care to assure that we are protecting not just the staff but the most vulnerable. Any other areas that I've not touched on, I'm very happy to pick up later.
Thank you. I would just highlight that we've taken 10 minutes on the first two questions. I do allow extra time for the front benches. We've taken 10 minutes to get through the first two questions. There are 11 members waiting. We now have 2 minutes 20 seconds to get through the remaining questions. Clearly, I will allow some more time, but that's not possible. I recently wrote out to all members asking them and ministers to be succinct, brief and succinct, and to have some pace in these proceedings. I would just appeal again. Annabel Ewing, to be followed by Brian Whittle. Annabel Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary, in fact, has referenced Fife in her remarks already, and as the MSP for Cowdenbeath constituency, I too, of course, was well aware of the initial problems in the rolling out of the flu vaccine for the over 65s, but I do agree that it appears that quite a lot of progress has since been made. However, looking to the next phases of the rollout, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if health boards, in fact, will be encouraged to facilitate greater take-up at community pharmacies, both in terms of the quantity of vaccine that will be made available to community pharmacies and in terms of the number of community pharmacies that can be included in this process?
Secretary.
The simple answer to that is yes, we certainly will. We wrote to boards on the 25th of September, encouraging the increased use of community pharmacies. We'll continue to do that. Can't make community pharmacies, of course, do this, but very many of them are keen to be part of the programme, and that will require us to look at the scheduling of the supply of vaccine to the various routes where the flu jab is delivered.
Thank you. Brian Whittle to be followed by Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I know the Cabinet Secretary is aware that there are significant health implications in delivering COVID restrictions to so many non-COVID conditions. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what the Scottish Government is doing in long-term planning to ensure that the backlog can be addressed once we are hopefully on the other side of this COVID pandemic?
Cabinet Secretary.
So we're doing two things. It's a really important question. The first is trying to maintain non-COVID healthcare services as we deal with COVID cases, as I've outlined, which is different from the steps that we took during the lockdown period earlier in the year. And that is to deal with the backlog, but also try and ensure that it doesn't grow any further. And there has been a decline in the backlog number of non-COVID cases between the end of the lockdown period and the beginning of September. So we want to try and maintain that using both Louisa Jordan and Golden Jubilee as I described. But in addition, the clinical prioritisation will allow, and it is clinically done, will allow across the country patients, I'm very keen patients know what they can expect. So the prioritisation goes from P1 to P4. We will set that out in more detail. Individual cases will then be clinically assessed so they know which of those they are. P1 and P2 are considered urgent and dealt with within that time frame. P3 within 3 months, P4 obviously over 3 months. So that work will apply the numbers to those clinical prioritisation and will allow us to be able to demonstrate in different scenarios how well we'll be able to work through those backlogs of cases.
Ruth Maguire to be followed by Sarah Bourg.
Presiding Officer, winter months can place additional pressures on our primary and community care services. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how health boards are working to ensure that my constituents are able to access these services closer to home throughout the winter period?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, Ms Maguire, I'm sure will remember that one of the things I've said repeatedly in the board mobilisation plans is that we need to have as much focus on primary and community care as we do in acute care. And that includes making best use of the Pharmacy First programme, which was launched some time ago, making best use of the entirety of our primary and community care practitioners, so not simply the GP, but practice nurses, allied health professionals and so on, some of which is picked up in the plans that we have published, for example, on rehabilitation and on work to deal with long COVID, so that we direct people to the right care in the right place. And that is picked up in the redesign of urgent care as well. Again, very happy to provide members with more detail of all of that as that detail is finalised and as that Pathfinder site works its way through November to see whether we can roll that out further from December onwards.
Thank you. Sarah Boyack to be followed by Alison Johnson.
Cabinet Secretary, given that planned operations are still only at half the levels of last year, can I follow Brian Whittle's question and ask whether you've published how long patients with different conditions will have to wait for elective surgery and treatment so that we can feed back to the patients who've written to us, and whether this will be impacted by staffing shortages as NHS staff have COVID, have to self-isolate or opt for early retirement?
Cabinet Secretary.
As I said to Mr Whittle, as the work is undertaken across the boards to apply that clinical prioritisation framework to individual cases, actually for me the most important people who need to know what the situation is those individual patients. And I'm determined that each of them will be written to in clear language that is understandable, that tells them what the decision has been made on their case and what they should expect. The overall situation across Scotland, broken down as far as we can to individual boards, we will make that available to members so that you know what the situation is in the area that you represent.
Thank you. Alison Johnson to be followed by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you. The plans describe a new urgent care pathway encouraging people who may not require emergency treatment to seek a clinical assessment by phone prior to travelling to A&E. And the statement confirms that the redesign of urgent care will be tested out. But will any corresponding impact that this redesign will have on primary care, which is already under significant strain, be highlighted too? Because the Cabinet Secretary will be aware of the concerns the BMA have raised in this regard. Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
So the modelling around that lies underneath the redesign of urgent care is that approximately 20%, and this is independent modelling undertaken by clinicians for us, approximately 20% of people who are at A&E is not the right place for the care that they need. And so the intention is to try and make sure that we can help patients determine where they should go. Now, obviously, if your situation is life-threatening and very urgent and that's how you feel, then you should go straight to A&E. But for many GP practices, out-of-hours services, Pharmacy First service is, and indeed some of the work undertaken by the Scottish Ambulance Service, particularly those highly trained and qualified paramedics, is the right place and the best place and more local for you to go. Primary care and the BMA have been actively involved in the redesign of this work. They will be involved in that Pathfinder project and in the evaluation of that, including its impact on them. And that evaluation and work will be overseen by Sir Lewis Ritchie, himself a GP, and particularly a GP with expertise in remote and rural general practice, because that's important. We need to make sure that the redesign works for all of Scotland and not just our urban centres.
Alice Cole-Hamilton, to be followed by Julian Martin.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The dramatic increase in those from high-risk groups who qualify for the flu vaccine has led to chaos in distribution. That programme will continue until the turn of the year. At the same time, there are strong indications that a viable COVID-19 vaccine could be approved for use within weeks. Given that the same high-risk groups will presumably be first in line for that vaccine, how does the Scottish Government intend to manage any overlap between these two distribution programmes?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the overlap in terms of the vaccinations is actually determined by what the clinicians and the Joint Committee for Vaccines tell us about how a COVID vaccine should be used and what its interaction should be with the flu vaccine. So they will say whether or not there should be any period of time between getting the flu vaccine and then getting the COVID vaccine, whether or not you need one shot of the COVID vaccine or two. All of that is still to be determined, and it in part is determined by the nature of the vaccine that is approved for use and is clinically safe for use that comes first, and the volume of that vaccine. So the broad answer to Mr Cole-Hamilton's question is we don't know that yet until we get that kind of clinical advice. That will be fed in to the overall delivery programme.
And Julian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to ask the Cabinet Secretary about capacity. The rollout of the flu vaccinations in the Grampian area has been slightly problematic. Staff capacity seems to be an issue more generally in dealing with that and the pandemic and everything else. With that in mind, what considerations has the Scottish Government given to the very real possibility of a no-deal Brexit on December the 31st? And what impact will this have on our NHS, which will then be in the middle of what we already know will be a very difficult winter?
Cabinet Secretary.
So a couple of points to make. NHS Grampian have recruited additional staff, and as I said earlier, they gave us this morning an assurance that there is currently no call queue on their appointment booking line, and that was one of the big pinch points for NHS Grampian. But we've asked them and all boards to make sure that their call handling facility is adequately resourced, as well as the location where the vaccine takes place. In terms of Brexit, we have been planning for Brexit in the health service for some time. The concerns remain around the impact of Brexit on the supply of medicines and other consumables. Now remain in terms of the vaccine itself, because it does depend if it is a vaccine that requires to be, before it is finished, if you like, and ready for use, to go to Europe and then come back before it can be used, and that is a strong possibility, then the impact of Brexit could make that a slower process than we would either want or need. But that isn't yet clear to us. It depends on which vaccine comes first, and it also depends on our continuing work with the UK government. So there is undoubtedly an uncertainty around all of this, depending on the impact of Brexit. I think even the least worried amongst us about Brexit would say that there is a risk of some impact. Whether that is some or is great on some of these programmes is yet to be determined, but we are planning in order to mitigate that as best as we can. But there will undoubtedly be an impact from Brexit.
Thank you very much, and apologies to Maurice Corrie, Joan McAlpine, Lewis MacDonald and Fulton McGregor. I'm afraid we have run out of time and no room for any further questions. We're going to move on shortly to the next item of business.